No one visited the old man anymore. Walter Grady lived alone in a crumbling cabin near the edge of Pine Hollow Forest. No family, no neighbors, and few words left to speak. His days passed quietly, until one harsh winter decades ago, when he stumbled upon 3 tiny bear cubs, orphaned and freezing in the snow. He could have walked away. Instead, he took them in, fed them, healed them, named them like they were his own. And when they were strong enough, he let them go. He never saw them again. Until 20 years later, when the forest caught fire, and the old man lay trapped beneath a fallen beam, smoke filling his lungs. And something massive moved through the flames to reach him. Because sometimes, the wild remembers. And when it does, it repays kindness in ways no one could believe. The wind howled across Pine Hollow Ridge like a wounded animal. Snowflakes drifted sideways, thick as feathers, clinging to the worn shingles of a tiny cabin half swallowed by trees. Inside, Walter Grady sat alone beside a crackling wood stove, fingers wrapped tightly around a chipped mug of tea. He was 73. A retired forest ranger with a lifetime of memories no one cared to ask about. No wife, no children, no visitors. Just creaking floors, framed photos of forgotten friends, and a world that seemed to have moved on without him. That winter had arrived early, angry and sharp. By late October, the first blizzard rolled in, sealing off roads and swallowing the forest trails under waist-deep drifts. Walter didn't mind the solitude. He preferred it, most days. But on the 3rd morning after the storm, something happened that would alter the course of his life. He heard a sound. Not wind. Not branches. A cry. Walter pulled on his boots, bundled in an old ranger parka, and stepped outside. His breath fogged the air as he scanned the woods. Then he saw it, movement near the tree-line, a flicker of dark fur in the snow. Cautiously, he followed it. There, beneath the bent limbs of a pine tree, were 3 bear cubs, no more than a few months old. Their mother was nowhere in sight. One cub limped. Another curled tightly against the others, barely moving. They were starving, shivering, and scared. Walter's first instinct was to back away. He knew better than to interfere with wildlife. But then he noticed the blood, a small trail leading away into the woods. He followed it a short distance, heart sinking. A she-bear lay motionless near a trap, long cold. The cubs were alone. And if he left them there, they'd be dead by morning. Walter gathered the cubs one by one. They didn't resist. Too weak, too cold, too small to fight. He brought them into the cabin, laid them beside the stove, and wrapped them in old flannel blankets. He prepared a mixture of goat's milk and water in a pan, feeding them with a cut-up sponge. For the first time in years, the silence in his home was broken, by tiny paws scraping across wood floors, soft grunts, and occasional yelps. He named them. Rusty, the bold one with copper-toned fur. Fern, the smallest, gentle and always near his side. Boulder, the big one, silent but watchful. Each day, they grew stronger. After 2 weeks, they played. After a month, they followed him outside, tumbling through snowbanks. He built a small enclosure behind the cabin, teaching them to forage, climb, and fish again once the creek thawed. Walter knew it couldn't last forever. And when spring came, he let them go. That spring, Walter stood on the porch as the 3 cubs disappeared into the trees. He didn't cry. But something inside him broke open, something long buried. It surprised him how much he missed them. How quiet the cabin became once more. Seasons passed. Years. He never saw them again. People still didn't visit. Cell signal didn't reach that far, and Walter didn't own a smartphone. He had his garden, his books, his firewood, and a rusty radio that worked when the wind blew west. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, he would hear branches crack outside. A distant rustle. He told himself it was deer, maybe raccoons. But deep down, he wondered, do they remember me? He never got an answer. Until the fire came. It began with smoke. Walter smelled it before he saw it, faint at first, like burnt toast drifting through the trees. He stepped outside, narrowing his eyes at the sky. It was hazy, orange-streaked, unnatural. Then the wind changed, and he saw it. A plume rising from beyond the southern ridge. Thick, black, and climbing fast. Wildfire. His ranger instincts kicked in instantly. He'd seen fires before, but not like this. Not this close. He rushed back inside, grabbed his old radio, and tried to tune into the emergency channel. Static. No signal. The only road out of Pine Hollow was already blocked by fallen trees from the last storm. He was trapped. Smoke began to roll through the forest like fog with a grudge. Ash rained down like black snow. Walter packed a bag, water, canned food, a flashlight. But as he reached for his coat, the cabin shuddered. A tree crashed nearby. And everything went black. Walter woke to pain. The beam from the cabin roof had collapsed, pinning his leg. Smoke thickened the air, and firelight danced along the walls like ghosts. He couldn't move. Every breath scorched his throat. The smoke alarm had long died. The heat grew louder, a roar just beyond the windows. He tried calling out, but his voice was barely a whisper. This is it, he thought. After all these years, this is how it ends. He closed his eyes. But then, a thud. Another. And then, a growl. Not angry. Familiar. His eyes snapped open. Through the haze, through the broken door frame, he saw a shadow, massive, moving fast, followed by two more. Bears. The first bear reached him quickly. Its dark eyes stared at him, intelligent, intense. It stepped forward, sniffed the air, then let out a low grunt. Then it did something unthinkable. It grabbed the beam with its teeth. Another bear, larger, joined in, pushing from the other side. Wood groaned. Something shifted. Walter gasped as the pressure on his leg lessened. He pulled himself free with his last ounce of strength and collapsed just as the third bear, smaller and lighter in fur, nudged him with its snout. Fern. He knew it instantly. Fern. Boulder. Rusty. His cubs. They had come back. And they were saving his life. The bears worked together. Boulder pulled at the straps of Walter's backpack with his teeth, dragging it out from the fire. Rusty circled, clearing a path through the door with sheer strength. Fern stayed close, nudging Walter's shoulder, pushing him gently toward the open doorway. The cabin's wall collapsed just as the last bear turned. Walter, half conscious, was pulled outside, smoke curling into the night, flames rising behind them. The forest glowed orange. But the bears didn't run. They stayed until he was clear. Until he was breathing. Until he was safe. And then, just as silently as they had arrived, they vanished into the burning woods. Walter drifted in and out of consciousness as dawn broke across a scorched forest. The wildfire had passed, leaving behind charred trees, smoking soil, and the collapsed remains of his cabin. It was a park helicopter that finally spotted him, lying near the creek, barely breathing, body covered in soot. They thought they were retrieving a body. But when the paramedics reached him, Walter opened his eyes and whispered, "They saved me." They didn't understand. They didn't know what he meant. Not yet. Walter spent weeks in the hospital, recovering from burns, smoke inhalation, and a broken leg. He was quiet at first. But eventually, he told the story. 3 bear cubs. Raised in a cabin. Released back into the wild. Then, 20 years later, they returned through fire and smoke to pull him from the ashes. Some called it hallucination. Others dismissed it as the ravings of an old man. But then the rangers reviewed satellite drone footage from the night of the fire. 3 large bears had been spotted entering the fire zone just before sunrise. None came out. Until 2 weeks later. Rangers at Pine Hollow began reporting strange sightings in the weeks following the fire. 3 bears. Always together. Never aggressive. One would approach ranger stations quietly, leaving behind fish or deer carcasses. Another was seen near the remains of Walter's cabin, pawing gently at the foundation before disappearing into the mist. Once, a young ranger left a water bucket near the edge of the forest trail. The next morning it was gone, replaced by a pile of wild berries. When they returned with Walter in a wheelchair to see what remained of his home, he paused at the edge of the treeline. There in the mud were 3 enormous paw prints. Fresh. He didn't say a word. He just smiled. The local paper ran it first. Old man says bears rescued him from fire. Then came the wildlife magazines, national TV, and eventually, global networks. Some mocked it. Others wept. But no matter what they believed, one thing was undeniable. Walter Grady had survived a wildfire that should have killed him. And he had no way out. No gear. No time. No strength. What he did have. A history with 3 bears. And a kind of bond science still couldn't explain. After the blaze, Walter didn't rebuild his cabin. Instead, the state offered him a modest home near the ranger station, where he could be cared for, visited, and, in truth, watched over. His story had drawn national attention. People donated to wildlife programs in his name. Schools wrote letters. Children mailed him hand-drawn pictures of bears and forests. But Walter wasn't interested in attention. What mattered most to him had no price. That they came back. Every spring, he'd visit the burned site, now regrowing with wildflowers and young saplings. The forest was healing. So was he. Each time he came, he left behind something. A jar of honey. A flannel cloth. A trout caught fresh from the nearby creek. And each time, something was taken, or replaced. The dance continued. Quiet. Unspoken. Mutual. 3 years after the fire, Walter received a call from one of the rangers, a young woman named April. "We've got a sighting," she said. 3 bears again. But, one of them smaller. Walter's heart skipped. They drove him into the edge of Pine Hollow. Rangers had set up a hidden observation post with trail cams and scopes. And there they were, unmistakable. Boulder, massive and calm. Fern, still graceful. Rusty, now slightly grayer around the muzzle. But beside them, waddling through the underbrush, was a tiny cub, playful and clumsy. Walter leaned forward, hardly breathing. They had families, he whispered. The wild hadn't just remembered him. It had carried his kindness forward. That fall, a bronze plaque was placed near the regrown clearing where Walter's cabin once stood. It read, "In memory of the bond between man and nature. Here stood the home of Walter Grady, who once saved 3 bear cubs, and was saved by them in return." Below it were 3 paw prints, etched side by side. Every year after that, people hiked the trail to the site. Some left flowers. Others, honey jars. Children left drawings in sealed jars, stories of bears, rescue, and love. And sometimes, though rarely, rangers reported seeing a bear at dusk, standing silently in the trees as if paying respects. A witness. A guardian. A reminder that in the quietest corners of the world, kindness is never forgotten. Walter lived to be 91. His body grew slower, his hands more fragile, but his eyes never lost their light, especially when he talked about the cubs. Not everyone believed his story. But to those who listened with open hearts, it became more than a tale. It became a symbol of how the wild watches. How it remembers. How it returns what we give, when we least expect it. That final winter, he asked to be taken to the old trail one last time. April, now a senior ranger, pushed his wheelchair up the path toward the spot where the plaque stood among snow-covered trees. He sat in silence for a while, staring out across the white hills. "I didn't do anything special," he said softly. "I just didn't walk away." And then, as if on cue, a shape moved beyond the trees. A massive bear, just visible through the falling snow. Behind her, 2 cubs. Watching. No sound. No movement. Just presence. Walter smiled. And that smile never left his face. Walter passed peacefully that night. His ashes were scattered at Pine Hollow, near the base of the old birch where the cubs had first appeared decades ago. And every spring after, fresh flowers bloomed there, earlier than anywhere else in the forest. Rangers say that sometimes, they find prints near the tree. Not alone. Grouped in 3s. Not once has anyone seen the bears up close again. But they know. And maybe that's the most beautiful part. That some stories are best whispered in wind and paw prints, not shouted in books or screens. Because when one man chose compassion over convenience, it echoed for a lifetime. And when the world burned around him, the wild he once saved him right back.